Chris.
Hello,
Good to see you.
good to see you
You're
as
the
well.
same person I saw you on the. Oh, yes, you're the same person I saw you in the photo. Good.
So, first of all, it's a joy to be sharing this hour with you,
And too.
and on the World Health Day. And I, for one, am honored not only to be speaking with you, but also I really appreciate that compassion and loving kindness is considered part of World Health Day. And I think this is a development in world culture that would be so.
Yes.
Insofar as uh, compassion and kindness, heartfulness, has always been considered a natural and expected part of um, caregiving, a part of doctoring, a part of providing health care. But to consider it a resource, and in fact, medicine itself, I think, at least in the West, is a relatively new idea. So, first of all, I'm kind of curious from your tradition, Daaji, how
Yes.
compassion, the role compassion has had in healthcare in general.
Well, where to begin since you brought in WHO, etc.? They set the standards after many years of gap. WHO is hardly 70, 80 years old organization. They see the importance of certain qualities like peacefulness. And that's why even United Nations was struggling to establish peace in the world. But how can you have worldwide peace unless and until one is individually at peace, one within oneself? Now, when we are dreaming of a world, compassionate world, kindness, empathy, love, heartfulness, it cannot be established with a magic wand. It has to be done at an individual level, one heart at a time. So, my focus has always been having identified the need, how to fulfill the need. How are we going to bring about this revolution with any of these qualities? How are we going to um, conceive this? First of all, the need in people, how to make them aware that yes, there is a need to be aware of these qualities. And emphasize that we as human animals are hardwired to perform these day to day tasks with compassion and kindness. And that's why we have been benefiting from nature, from this hard wiring, that each time some acts of kindness are performed, you feel at peace, you feel joyful, you feel ecstatic. Right? You ask a child, why don't you distribute these pencils to your friends in the class? And he comes back with so much of joy. You can tell him now, distribute some chocolates. So this is how we create and make them understand that when we share, you become so joyful. So right from early childhood, we can start doing this with our children. Pencil doesn't cost much. Crayon doesn't cost much. Chocolates doesn't cost much. But this establishes a kind of, or nurtures habits. And having created this habit, when they grow up, they will also be able to share ideas. They'll be able to share something even greater. They'll learn how to even sacrifice their comforts for the sake of others. That is compassion, sacrificing your own comforts for the sake of others. And going beyond when you are yourself comfortable and trying to extend compassion or kindness, versus when you're in difficulty and yet you are being compassionate. So we move one notch higher and higher each time and this evolution is sure to happen. Despite of inconvenience, the world, I think, will change. But we have to show the way right from the early age. From moment we get an opportunity of having a child in a nursery schools, that's where we can begin. Despite of parents, because how many parents are you going to teach? It's best to teach one teacher to take it up to these toddlers. And of course, if parents can take it up, then it has to go much higher at a much deeper level. Right? And I like to go beyond this idea of maintaining certain value system within oneself, having our own standards. And when two individuals they come together, husband and wife, and when they are in a certain state of mind, when they love each other in a true sense, I'm not talking of romance, but really they care for each other, love each other, then the kind of vibration is it is set up in such a way that the incoming soul will itself be vibrating at a similar frequency, or the incoming soul will have a resonance with the loving parents. And that's when the training begins, from the very beginning. Yeah. And then as they start speaking, when you, for example, when you are contemplative in some corner and you are seated and ruminating over something, or when you are serving someone in some organization, you are serving food to someone, or you're distributing clothes to someone, take these children and see what you are doing. You may not make them do it. Now and then you may say, okay, why don't you give a spoon to so and so. So these acts of kindness from the very beginning, if they learn, it will have a permanent impact on their tender minds. So I think we have to catch them younger and start training. And then as we proceed further, as they become more aware, more mindful, and then when they start perceiving that, yes, I can be heartful as well, then this combination will be a win-win situation. Now, how to achieve this? Now, today's children, right? I mean, teenagers, if you speak about, or 30 plus, 50 plus, how to make them understand the seriousness, how badly we are in need of this compassionate heart, right? And how to nurture it and make it expand. We give various methodology, not with the aim of creating the compassion, etc. It's a side byproduct. You see, in many years back when I was practicing pharmacy in Brooklyn, there was a drug called Lonitan by Upjohn, if I'm not mistaken, 10 milligram. You heard minoxidil. They are the pioneers, I think. And it was initially invented for blood pressure. But after 2 or 3 years of being in the market, even women started growing mustache. So that's when they found the side benefit is it can cure baldness. So there it goes. They started with initially 1%, 2.5% minoxidil, and then it started. It became a $1 billion product. So meditation, though it was developed in ancient India for a different purpose, but the side effect today, I mean side benefits, are this softening of the heart, kindness, loving heart, compassionate heart, being more empathetic, basic good men's values. uh, one whom you can say gentleman or a good
My
man.
question, if I may gently ask, right now the world with climate change is at a critical juncture, and in order, in my view, in order for us to care for the Earth, we need a very long view. We need to be able to expand our circle of compassion to include all the creatures, not just our family members and so forth. Do you think we have time?
I think so. We have. We are. We are at the critical moment. It's what we call tipping point. Either you can go this way or you can go this way. Depends on how we respond to this emergency. Now, anytime we make a wrong decision, there is always imbalanced mind. You understand? You get me there. The imbalanced mind makes wrong decisions. Whether as a doctor, if I am not having sanity and then I try to treat a patient, my diagnosis may not be correct. As a sculptor, it can fail me also. If I'm a musician and I lost piece of my mind, I can only make noise on the stage. Similarly, all these environmentalists, they're good people, but they're making too much noise unnecessarily rather than acting. Of course, they are better than people who are spoiling the weather and environment. I'm sorry, I should not use the word weather, but it's indirect effect of the environment on weather. But environmentalists, they have to go beyond making noise. Do something about it. Say. We're wasting too much of energy there. Politicians, I don't think we can expect too much from them. They have their agenda. Let them fly with their agendas. This awareness at individual level throughout the world has to sip in, and for that we need some awareness. And again, this awareness is a business of the mind and the heart. One has to become wiser in the process. And I have come up with this terminology which has been bugging me since I was almost 14 or 15 years of age. That those days, that goes back to I would say 68, 69. People didn't worry about pollution. But my only worry was thought pollution at that time. People don't know how to regulate their inner climate. Too much of pollution is there, thought pollution, and which is at its worst today. More than this climate impact, at an individual level, if we can fix our inner weather, then we can make right decisions. Everything in life can smoothly move. And whatsoever we may be doing in whatever profession we may be doing, are in, but because of this inner balance, where your thoughts are very well regulated, you can do magical things in the world. So basic root cause is imbalance at the mind level, say.
Well, I'm pleased that the World Health Day is having this conversation right now because I think we need to um, make changes on a global level from the bottom up, as you're describing, in terms of cultivating the heart and cultivating the mind. But we also probably do need systemic change. We probably do need, not just probably, we do need people who are making decisions to, create laws and things which help us to behave in a way that will, I think, sustain the planet. Um, uh, I also think that in terms of clarification, clearing the mind and also cultivating the heart, one of the easiest ways of expanding the circle of our compassion is through what we're calling now self-compassion, or what is historically been known as inner compassion. It's in my view, it's a little bit like falling in love. Everybody has had at some point that experience, and it has been pretty easy. It might have been difficult to fall out of love, but easy to fall in love. But similarly, historically, compassion has always been something that we experience toward others, and we have almost systematically excluded ourselves from that. One of the things that I love about your heartfulness training and practice is it's a radical affirmation. It's a radical U-turn. In other words, our attention and our love and our awareness flows so naturally out. But in order to sustain love and compassion, in order to expand love and compassion, I think it's really necessary also to include ourselves in the circle of that compassion. And that means in particular to fall in compassion, just as we fall in love, to fall in compassion. So I often ask myself, in order for this, we desperately need more compassion in this world in order to survive as a species, in order to protect the planet. How do we expand the circle of our compassion? I love the way you said, yes, for starters, we need to understand that this is a good thing and worthwhile cultivating. I love the example you gave of the pencils, that there is a sense of well-being in compassion, in this case, compassion for others. But my sense is that compassion for others is just not sustainable or expandable unless we include ourselves in the circle of our compassion. That's mostly what I go around the world, reminding people of. And some people worry, oh, this is selfish and so forth. But the research shows precisely the opposite. The research shows that people who are self-compassionate are actually more compassionate toward others. The research shows that people who are self-compassionate are more emotionally resilient. They can recover from failure and misfortune. Most interestingly, for health, the research shows that people who are self-compassionate their immune systems work better in a moment of self-compassion. They have fewer health problems. Their health behaviors are better. They eat less. They smoke less. They drink less. So it's all a good thing. Well, the research shows that any of the misgivings that people have about self-compassion are actually misconceptions. It's a good thing. But in our culture, we systematically, and right now I'm talking about world culture because I've been around the whole world having this conversation, there's a bias against including ourselves in the circle of compassion. So what I particularly enjoy in your practice, and frankly in spiritual practice in general, in sadhana, is in your practice a radical affirmation of the human heart, and in particular our own human heart, and taking responsibility for that human heart, taking responsibility for that heart to be, as it were, clean. I love the cleaning meditation that you have. But even more foundationally, to know that our heart and our human heart is a place of safe refuge, a place that we can go to and rest in, because it is far vaster than anything that we have ever imagined. So my wish is that when people practice self-compassion, not only are they caring for themselves in a way that will help them to care for others, but that in the process, they discover the vastness of their own hearts. I was thinking, before we got on this call, like how does your work and my work interface? And in particular, I just so appreciate the assumption of our inherent goodness and our inherent health, as well as a mechanism a practice for living there with joy in that place. I do think for our listeners that they would probably love to hear more about the heart meditation in your tradition, as well as a little more of the cleaning. Because as you said, our world needs some cleaning, and if we don't clean our own hearts and minds, it's not going to get clean.
Well, as you correctly put, the need for such things, compassionate heart, loving heart, world needs it more than ever, actually. It was always needed in the past. Today, it's even needed much more than ever. See? And especially when I go through certain verses recited between two or many sages of the past, my ancient recollection from the literature is 12,000-year-old dialogue between a king who was saintly in nature and another gentleman also whose whole lifetime was devoted to research on consciousness. His name is Astvakra and the king is Janaka. Janaka is very eager to learn what is true knowledge, how to detach ourselves from the worldly worries and worldly problems. Buddha calls it Vairagya. And third, how to liberate oneself, the purpose of life according to him. And surprisingly, one of the qualities Astavakra requests this king to develop. Out of 5 qualities, one of them is compassion. Second one is contentment. Third one, he says, sincerity. Fourth one, he says, be truthful to yourself. And in all these things, it applies to individual self. See? Being content, it is towards myself. I cannot say, let me be content, my wife is having headache. It won't work. Right? So, my contentment should be reflected to myself. Compassionate towards myself. It starts with the self first. Then a time comes, as we advance through our consciousness, we forget ourselves. And we care for the creation, the worldly creation. Because then there is synchronicity or resonance with yourself and with others. Even before somebody might become victim to certain misery, you become aware of it and you try to help. So many ways when we look at compassion, it is much better than Gandhian philosophy. Gandhi, he was famous for non-violence. Right? But being non-violence is a very limited approach. Okay, I may not inflict pain on someone, but I can go one mile longer and say I can be compassionate. I have not hurt someone, but I can be compassionate, which is on a higher pedestal. So what we are trying to achieve, Chris, it is going beyond Gandhi. See, if you look at it very thoroughly and very deeply, it demands a lot. But it is very simple. To achieve this, it's very simple. We start with meditation on the heart. If you like, we can have an experiment also. You can have 20 or 30 subjects who can meditate on the heart itself, thinking of presence of, that is divine. Or they can have their own meditation and say, I'm meditating on Lord Jesus, or I'm meditating on compassion, or I'm meditating on kindness, or I'm just thinking that my heart is becoming more and more loving. Right? As you say, falling in love, right? So one can also mentally imagine I'm falling in compassion and I'm becoming better human being. So we can have a set of 10 subjects or 20 subjects. And we can have the same meditation, meditating on falling in compassion within your heart, or falling in love within your heart, or being more kind, being more loving in your heart. But with transmission. I don't know if you heard this word transmission from in that book. It's all it actually in Sanskrit word is pranahuti. Pranahuti. We use this force. It is forceless force, though, but we still call it some sort of energy, though it's not energy. We transmit it to the person who is meditating it. And when we measure the shift in consciousness in two groups, you will see a 90% difference easily. So one can say, okay, the group who received transmission, whose heart will melt quickly, they'll become kinder and compassionate faster. Now, second thing we recommend is cleaning process. Cleaning of, let me put it this way. We have, by and large, two types of memories. One is cognitive memory, another is emotional part attached to that memory. When you have a fight or an argument with someone, you will remember this at a mental level. At the same time, your heart will also be affected because of that argument, which affects you emotionally. So, we try to forget at a mind level and we try to forgive at an emotional level. Through this cleaning, we are able to make peace with this emotional memory. We get rid of this emotional baggage. It is good to retain, it will be good. I mean, if you can forget, it is okay. But even if it is retained in the mind that someone has harmed you, right? So it's okay to retain cognitive memory. But I must not retain the emotional part of it and become enemy to that person, because that person can always change. If I can reverse the equation and say, oh, I had a bad argument with Chris. I wish Chris may forget my mistake. And if Chris had a good heart and said, okay, I forgive Kamlesh, then I am at peace. Oh, Chris has really forgiven me, though he may not forget. If I keep repeating the same thing again and again, again and again, then you label me that, oh no, he continues to make mistakes and I continue to forgive. So we learn a lot from this process of selectively forgiving, selectively forgetting. Forgetting no one can do. It is not inbuilt in us. But through compassionate heart, we can easily forgive.
Letting go of the emotional part. In Sicily, they have a cute expression. They say, love your neighbor, but don't forget their names.
That's a good one, see?
We don't want to make the same mistakes again, but we want to free the heart.
So we get rid of this baggage of emotional baggage. And when we free up this space inside, I think you can expand it for better qualities, you see. And as we become better and better with these things, you become, I think, so sensitive that even the very thought of getting angry will upset you, will disturb you. So you cannot get angry. It's not that you will not, you cannot. You lose this ability slowly and slowly. So automatically, without planning to become kinder or loving or compassionate, you automatically become that But if you have goal that yes, I want to become this, at the same time you meditate like that, and anything that is interfering in this process, let me get rid of it through this cleaning process. The interesting thing I find is, why self-compassion? Why is self-compassion today so more important than ever? Because of this polluted mind. Too much of misdirected thinking leads us to do wrong things. And doing wrong things deliberately makes you feel guilty. So the need for self-compassion, it's all right, I made a mistake. I can forgive myself. There's no real harm done to anybody else. But I can recuperate myself and get more strength and say, okay, henceforth I will not do that again. So self-compassion must lead to stronger resolutions. Why in the first place do I need self-compassion? Right? There's a need. Now, if I can get rid of that idea that there is no need to be self-compassionate, meaning I should not have done something wrong that demands my attention to be self-compassionate, then it will be very, very productive. And so, many religions, they recommend offering a prayer to God, becoming more aware of one's weaknesses, and present it to the higher, I would say, present it to your own self, to your higher self, or have a dialogue with yourself. Oh, I did this mistake. How to correct myself?
You know what I'd be curious about, Daaji? The if self-compassion is nothing else, at least within the psychological context, it's an antidote to shame. It's an
Beautiful.
antidote to shame.
Beautiful. You put it so brilliantly. I love
And,
that.
and so you're talking about,
I love that.
and thank you. And so when you talk about offering to God and so forth, it requires a certain humility, in a prayer, or when you talk about forgiveness, it requires a certain humility. People can't forgive themselves. They can't see their, you know, imperfect humanity, you might say, unless we have some way of holding ourselves in the midst of shame. Shame, in my view, is fundamental to a sense of duality. As soon as there are two, then there's shame. That's embedded in the story of Adam and Eve and so forth. But I think it's also my experience that when I feel like a separate person, then suddenly there's a ton of imperfection. And if I'm not okay about that, with the imperfection, I just can't. I can't function. I can't grow. I can't sign on to cleaning my heart. I can't do anything. So I'm sort of curious, apropos the practices in your tradition, whether there is any kind of how shame plays the role of shame, the role of working with shame.
Well, first thing we have to.
I'm just curious about how that unfolds in what you're describing.
Okay. I'll. I put it. It will take me a little longer to explain. Okay. In our day-to-day life activities, or when you are sitting just quietly, maybe you are in a train or in a plane, and when you're just sitting there doing nothing, you're scanning the passengers. Oh, this person is good. This person is taking too much baggage. She is overdressed. She shouldn't have put that lipstick. The mind goes on and on. And as it goes on, depending upon cultural baggage that we have, we start judging people. We start liking them or disliking them. There is rarely a neutral point to this where you don't react. Very rare moment. You noticed it, right? When you watch a TV also, oh, she's gorgeous, right? Or, oh, the TV advertisement on TV, I must have that TV. I like that TV. Or that resort vacation, I must go to that resort place. So we start liking things, objects. Similarly, we being human animals, we also have sensual requirements, or we have sensuousness. I wish she was my wife. Some people start dreaming like that. And you may also say, oh, I can never marry her. So, in broad categories, we have needs at objective level and subjective level, subjective at a sensuous level. Now, both creates vibrations in our heart. Both will have a different pattern. The vibrations arising out of this sensual need will be heavier than the need that you feel, perceive for having a TV or a vacation on some resort, which is very lighter and you can easily forget also. But the other one will be heavier and it has a greater impact on you. Now, when we do things knowingly, deliberately, or sometimes we ignore things deliberately. Imagine a doctor who is driving, witnesses an accident. His heart is compassionate and says, oh, let me stop my car and help this person who needs my help. But then he feels, oh, I need to go to my office fast, my boss is waiting. He gets scared and he decides to override his compassion and goes to office. Next day or the same evening, he might hear on the TV that person at such and such a junction died. Then if the doctor is really sensitive, he would feel terribly guilty. Oh, I could have done something, but I didn't do. He'll feel really disgusted with himself for not listening to his heart in the first place. That can make you feel guilty. So now we have another circumstance where the impressions on the heart are no longer objective or subjective, but totally arising out of your negligence, which is much heavier than any of the previous two. And it settles down also in the heart. It becomes like a heavy heart at that time. And you are not able to forget this for all your life sometimes. Many a time the missed opportunities we have, and we had, and we keep remembering those things, they weigh us heavily. Missed opportunities. Or something that we have done wrongly, but knowingly. So they also create feeling of shame and guilt. So we have now 3 levels of impressions. You can say 3 tiers. One, the guilt and shame. Second is sensuousness. And third is objective world. Need for luxury. So that is it. And I have given them this. If you are a good meditator, you can feel those vibrations arising in yourself under all these circumstances. Or when you are a trainer in this heartfulness way, and somebody who is overloaded with these impressions. You will feel it reflected in yourself that maybe this person who is in front of me is loaded with guilt. So we do a specific cleaning on objective or subjective impressions, and person benefits to that extent until he loads himself again. Because there are certain tendencies, though you remove them, they again bring it back. So we need to also make their mind so aware so that they don't form impressions in the first place. And that can happen only through a mind which is meditative. Meditative mind, or the mind which is so aware, it will deflect things before it happens in you. Suppose when I know that what I'm thinking will have bad consequence, or if I do this now, there is a possibility of all these results. And when I see that they are not good for my well-being, I would avoid them. So this way, meditation helps us becoming very mindful about our next step. So it is not only becoming aware of now and presencing now, but it will be a good idea to see the presencing in the future and the consequence of my acting now or thinking now. And can I present myself in the future that way? So that is a wiser step, see? So that we are kind of vaccinating ourselves against future calamity, future consequences.
On the one hand, cleansing, particularly what I'm appreciating is that the way you're describing that is with another human being in the room as well. In other words, when we feel shame about something, it's actually much easier to work with that not alone because shame always has kind of an interpersonal aspect. So to work to cleanse that with another person, I think you were describing, right? Maybe in the
Yes.
in the context of transmission, but then also to spend more time in one's own experience in meditation, such that there is a little room or space in our lives that we can anticipate what our choices will yield in terms of consequences, and then choose not to do it. In other words, not to accumulate more shame.
Correct. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Correct.
But what about,
Perfect.
Daaji, what about the shame that we, in some respects, are not responsible for? In other words, if we are born into an environment that is critical, if we suffer abuse or neglect, these kinds of what we call internalized shame or internalized messages can have a huge impact on our health, you know, on our health not only because of the way we behave, but also also in terms of just immune functioning, you know. And this is trickier stuff because the sense of self is hijacked, as it were, by, as Tara Brach says, the trance of unworthiness, you know. So I'm sort of curious how within the heartfulness way, one would work with internalized shame, the kind of shame that's wrapped up in who I am, you know, feeling bad about oneself, you know, self-hatred, things like this. I think this is really fundamental in terms of healthcare, that people, in order to take really good care of ourselves, we have to see the value in ourselves. We have to consider ourselves precious in some way, that it is worth being healthy. And I think so many people, even if they haven't suffered early childhood abuse or neglect, they nonetheless are not really convinced of their preciousness and the value of caring for oneself in a way that is personally healthy and also good for the rest of the world. So how would you work with in the heartfulness way with, you might say, shame that is embedded in the sense of self-hatred?
Yeah. This is a tough one, but it is possible. It is possible. Youngsters today, they come to me and there are multiple love affairs. They feel bad at times, either taking advantage of someone or being taken advantage of, you know, by one's own family members or some friends or strangers, and it really scars you from within. More you think of it, deeper it becomes. So when they say though I have this problem, and they become more sensuous also sometimes, and say I just don't want to remember all these things. So first of all, we have to make them understand that more you remember or more you try to forget, you're again trying to bring it back again on a conscious level. When we fix a higher goal, automatically these things will fade away in the background. Also, as preceptors or the trainers, we keep on working on these deeper impressions which gravitates to the core. We try to remove them from the core itself. We give also the understanding, make them understand that what if I drink some water now, or if I speak some unkind word to someone, can I take back those words even half a second later? I can't. Something that happened many, many years back, can I change them? No, I cannot. I was too innocent, too naive to be taken advantage of. So I should try and forget, but not in an active fashion. I have to establish a higher goal. As they say, lazy mind is the evil's or devil's workshop, or empty mind is devil's work. It has to stay busy. Now, when I'm preoccupied with my heaviness, my shame, my guilt, it's not going to help me. I have to establish a nobler goal in my life, as you say, of self-compassion. Or when you talk of even self-compassion, you'll keep remembering that. So now, shower it on others. Keep yourself busier in some other kinder acts. So you can have a multi-pronged approach to this. Meditate deeply, establish a higher goal, then the smaller worries will fade off in the background. Cleaning, which we teach them how to do this. And trainers are also there who can help them get out of this, what we call web of complexity at a multiple level. See, it is easier to clean my physical body. I take a shower and I'm done. When I work in a coal mine, I may need maybe extra soap twice. That's all, but it is still easier. When I have to get rid of some thought pattern, it takes time. And when I go further deeper into myself and try to clean at emotional level, it becomes even more difficult. More I try to clean, it seems that I'm digging a deeper grave for myself. So actively pursuing to get rid of these emotional scars, I think you have to surrender it to someone with faith that I surrender it to you, my Lord. Please help me, and that will have better impact.
So you've mentioned a few, I think, really important practices that people who are suffering from shame, early childhood shame, can do. One is to connect with a higher purpose. I really appreciate that. Another is to, with another person, with a trainer, to address it directly. Another is to practice meditation to the extent that one can and not get re-traumatized, because when we look in, sometimes we see too much and cannot look in, we call this backdraft, when we start to give ourselves, there's a saying, love reveals everything unlike itself, which means we start to give ourselves kindness, or we start to live in kindness. We start to discover the ways that we were not treated kindly. It can be kind of overwhelming. But I can fully appreciate that in the context of devotional practice, or surrendering to God, or having a trainer to work with, or to be busy. In the U.S., Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of the sages from the 1800s, said, work is better than whiskey for calming the mind. And as you said, idle hands, devil's
Nice.
work. We do need to give the mind something to do, because in the absence of something productive to do, it will seek out trouble. The mind looks for trouble when it's idle. So anyhow, I do appreciate all those aspects, ways of transforming, you might say, a damaged self-image, one that.
And I think also
Go ahead.
to have company of some good-hearted people with you all the time. In certain communities, you may be alone and you may think, there's nobody who thinks like me. But you can always find some people with whom you can associate, like, coming together of like-minded people. It creates certain aura, certain level of consciousness. I would say many like-minded people, when they come together, not necessarily physically. You could be in Chicago, one person in LA, third person in Tokyo maybe. And when you are meditating together at a different location, right? Or one person from Tokyo is transmitting to a person in LA or Chicago. This is all possible. You have a company of like-minded person. You're not alone. So I think we are able to also solve this problem of traveling together. Your journey in spirituality becomes easier. And most important thing I find that you'll feel that you're not alone. That loneliness, though you may be alone in the house, but you will not feel lonely. You will always have this consciousness of that there are people who are like me. And that's a very soothing feeling. So this epidemic of loneliness can be combated with this approach.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And also, when it comes to shame, one of the key factors in shame is a sense of isolation. Shame and isolation
Yes, they
they
hide
just
it.
go together. It's just part of what
They
shame
hide it.
is. But then to create a satsang, or a company of good-hearted people, is surely part of the recipe for healing. As we're speaking,
Yes.
I'm touched by two things. I started out by asking you, so what about the world climate crisis? It really is an emergency. That was your word, and I agree. And also, I asked, what about shame? So these are two very sticky issues. Shame is a very sticky personal issue. Climate is an enormous global issue. But what I'm appreciating in our conversation is that there is a fundamental and deeply resonant, quiet optimism in your heart vis-a-vis these what seemingly impenetrable issues. And I don't think I don't think we've, as human beings, we don't have a quick or even a certain formula for the world or for individuals to deal with some of these tricky things. However, what I'm appreciating is a quiet optimism, a quiet, faith or confidence or trust that we as human beings and as a species have what it takes to overcome our personal and our collective global problems. And this to me is an important takeaway from our conversation, Daaji.
Yes.
Is that quiet faith that we can do this. We can do this. That it feels like a very deep burden, but we can do this.
We can certainly make a difference, definitely. And our experience, this organization is unofficially been present since 1890s, officially since 1945. So it's almost 70 plus years of association with general public, where millions of people have benefited from this cost-free offer. You see, there are many gurus, they come from India, they go all over the world. But they have become kind of yoga merchants. There is a transaction. But with this system, what heartfulness is truly heartful. There is no commercial transaction whatsoever. I mean, if someone is benefited, they will always sponsor at an individual level. For example, XYZ or John is fallen sick and he needs this help. And past beneficiary sees that John needs a help, but he cannot afford to travel to India. You see, the travel expenses can be met by someone, but while in India, when he is going through these practices, there are no charges. There are zero charges. Actually, accommodation is free here. Food is also free here. And that's another beauty of this system, that slowly it is spreading, and not just getting rid of the shame and guilt, but it brings in confidence. It makes you more even bubbly and joyful. Life suddenly, and it doesn't take decades. You just give me 2 days or 3 days, that's all. And such change can be brought about. Afterward, to maintain such a state is your business. Continue with this practices, because it's not just one day affair. Once you make a lifestyle change, then you have to stick on to it. You have to stay on with it. And this practice doesn't demand much. Maybe 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, 5 minutes before you go to bed. That's all. So 45 minutes, it's worth investing.
I think it's fundamental for individual health, global health. And I really appreciate this important message that you are sharing with the world on this World Health Day.
Thank you, Chris. And I wish you would come here once to India and be with us, share your thoughts with other members. Whenever you come to India, please think of us.
Thank you. Thank you. I would look forward to that.
Thank you. Please, please.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to hold this, the echoes of this conversation in my heart right now because I have 60 people waiting in the neighboring room, and I need to go off and address them. So I will carry your optimism, I will carry your love, and I will carry your trust as I walk into that room in the next 10 minutes, okay?
And so will I. Thank you.
Thank you so much.